There are hundreds of bizarre mysteries that are out there just waiting to be uncovered. Sometimes these mysteries are solved by sheer coincidence, while others dedicate their lives to solving historical crimes. Number 5. Many of us hold cherished memories of reading the book The Little Prince, or having it read to us by a parent or guardian. Many people don't realize that behind one of the world's most infamous books is a historical mystery that has spanned decades and has only recently been solved. The Little Prince was first published in 1943 and written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. At the outbreak of World War II, Saint-Exupéry utilized his previous aviation experience and decided to join the French Air Force in their efforts to fight off the impending German invasion. This wasn't a decision that he took lightly, and knew that it was his duty to dedicate himself to the French resistance and play his part in stopping the Axis forces. During his time in the Air Force, Saint-Exupéry wrote The Little Prince, along with many other books and short stories. These provided him with a sense of comfort and hope, reminding him that despite the dark times he was living in, happiness was just around the corner. Little did Saint-Exupéry know that his book would go on to provide millions of people around the world with the same happiness he felt while writing it. Then, in 1944, Saint-Exupéry mysteriously vanished without a trace while he was out performing a reconnaissance mission. Everyone in his squadron was devastated when they returned to their base, only to find an empty spot where Saint-Exupéry's plane should have been. The Air Force searched day and night for the missing pilot. However, all they found was an unidentified body wearing a uniform. Everyone believed they had just found the remains of Saint-Exupéry, and he was buried days later. But that still left the mystery of what had happened on that fateful day in 1944. It wouldn't be until 2004 that this decades-old mystery would finally be laid to rest. French scuba diving teams came across the remnants of a P-38 plane deep in the Mediterranean Sea. The team knew that they'd made the discovery of a lifetime, and it wasn't until they cross-referenced serial numbers with historical records that they realized they'd found the missing plane of Saint-Exupéry. Following this baffling discovery, a German soldier came forward and claimed responsibility for Saint-Exupéry's demise, telling authorities that he had shot down his plane sometime in 1944. However, the evidence recovered from Saint-Exupéry's plane does not match up with this account, and it's now widely accepted that he perished at sea. Number 4. Marcellin and Francine Dumoulin lived a simple life in the village of Chandolin in Switzerland. After getting married, the couple went on to have 7 children. Marcellin worked as a shoemaker, while Francine worked as a school teacher in a small village to help provide for the family. Not much else is known about the family's life, with most news articles writing that they lived a relatively calm and peaceful existence. That all changed on August 15, 1942, when the 40-year-old Marcellin and 37-year-old Francine left the family home to go and milk their cows. According to their eldest daughter, Monique, quote, "My father hugged me and promised he'd return later that evening after tending to the cows." Sadly, as the hours passed and the skies darkened, there was no sign of Marcellin and Francine Dumoulin. As morning broke, Monique knew that something was terribly wrong and ran over to a neighbor's house to ask if they had seen her parents. Monique was horrified to hear that her neighbors hadn't seen them, telling the Daily Mail, quote, "When she said she hadn't, I started crying. I knew it was bad." A search was launched by the priest, a friend of my father. The whole village helped, but there was no sign, no clues. Days turned into weeks, and soon the Dumoulin children realized that their parents were never coming home. They were sent to live with different families throughout the village, but they were left wondering what had happened to their parents. Then in July of 2017, the Dumoulin children received the shock of their lives when investigators confirmed that the decades-old mystery had been solved. Investigators confirmed that they had found the frozen bodies of their parents in a nearby glacier. They also confirmed that their bodies had been perfectly preserved after being frozen for decades. They were able to obtain DNA samples, which, when compared to their surviving children, produced a match. They also found personal belongings at the scene, which bore the names Marcellin and Francine. It's believed that the couple fell into a crevice where they laid unidentified for decades. After their bodies were discovered, investigators worked with the children to arrange a funeral, and Marcellin and Francine were buried together in a joint service at the local church. The Dumoulin children are grateful that their decades-long mystery was finally resolved and they were able to say goodbye. Number 3. For those who went to school in North America, you may be familiar with the USS Indianapolis and the disturbing mystery that will haunt the ship for many years. The USS Indianapolis and the crew played a key part in World War II, and in July of 1945, they would unknowingly embark on their final mission to the Pacific island of Tinian. The US government had chosen the USS Indianapolis and the crew to embark on the mission that would almost guarantee the end of the war. Their mission was to deliver components and parts for the first atomic bomb, which later became known as Little Boy. The first part of their trip went without incident, and the parts were delivered to the American soldiers and scientists waiting for them. Just a week after this delivery, Little Boy was dropped on Japan and completely changed World War II forever. It wasn't until the USS Indianapolis was making its return journey that they were attacked. The ship and the 1,197 men aboard were sailing through the Philippines when they were ambushed by Japanese submarines. One survivor recalled, quote, "Womb, up in the air I went. There was water, debris, fire, everything just coming up, and we were about 25 meters from the waterline. It was a tremendous explosion. Then, about the time I got to my knees, another one hit. Womb." In total, there were 2 torpedoes fired at the USS Indianapolis, and within 12 minutes the ship had completely sunk. Multiple SOS messages were broadcasted in the ensuing chaos. However, no one came forward to rescue them, and the US Navy brushed the SOS messages off as a hoax. For 4 days, small pockets of survivors clung to whatever debris they could find. And then on the 4th day, a miracle happened. A Navy plane was flying overhead and spotted the men. From there, a recovery mission was launched, and the remaining survivors were taken to dry land. The US Navy were keen to cover up their shortcomings and began pinning the blame onto the ship's captain. They showed little interest in finding the USS Indianapolis or offering support to the 317 men who survived. After that, the ship faded from the minds of the US Navy, but not from the minds of the general public. Years after the incident, the ship began making its way into the spotlight again thanks to the movie Jaws. While there was a renewed interest in the USS Indianapolis and its crew, historians had no idea where the ship was and set out on a quest to find it. It wasn't until 2017, when Paul Allen funded an expedition to find the missing ship, that the historical mystery was finally cracked. Allen was inspired to help find the USS Indianapolis after a historian discovered records of the ship's exact whereabouts in the hours before the tragedy. 5,500 meters below the surface of the Philippine Sea, Allen's crew made a startling discovery. After utilizing sonar technology, topographical data, and historical records, they'd finally found the ship. In a press conference, Allen said, quote, "Because this is a war grave and property of the US Navy, the specific location is only provided to the US Navy for them to administrate. There have been no further details released in regards to the ship, but after 72 years, the mystery has finally been solved." Number 2. For years, the mystery of the Blood Falls in Antarctica has baffled scientists and the general public. The mystifying falls were first discovered by Griffith Taylor in 1911, during what is believed to be one of the earliest Antarctic explorations. Taylor and his group of scientists were perplexed by the falls and dedicated their time to finding it. They hypothesized that red algae in the water was responsible for turning the water a blood red color, but it turns out they were completely wrong. For over a century, other scientists picked up where Taylor left off and examined the falls, but were unable to come to a solid conclusion. The general public began speculating that the Blood Falls were somehow tied to aliens or something otherworldly, and bizarre conspiracy theories began popping up. It wasn't until 2017 that the truth behind the Blood Falls was finally uncovered. A team of researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks decided to try and put an end to the mystery once and for all. The team wrote a paper that has since been published in the Journal of Glaciology and explained that the blood red color of the falls is caused by the Taylor Glacier. The Taylor Glacier feeds into the Blood Falls, which is packed with iron. Once the brine salt water of the Taylor Glacier meets the iron, it oxidizes and creates the deep red color that we're seeing cascading down the falls. Number 1. In 1979, a family was out searching for arrowheads in Buffalo Cave, Idaho, when they came across a strange burlap sack deep in the cave. Upon opening it up, they found a headless torso. They immediately called the authorities and an investigation was opened. Then in 1991, a hand, an arm, and legs of the body were discovered in the cave, and forensic experts began their analysis. The experts were able to determine that the body was that of an adult male of European descent and between the ages of 30 and 40. However, without the man's head present, identification proved almost impossible. As the man had been wrapped in a burlap sack and placed in the cave, his remains had been extremely well preserved, and his post-mortem interval was listed as 5 months to 6 years. Despite their best efforts, authorities in Idaho failed to identify the unknown man, and he simply became known as the Buffalo Cave John Doe. Those closest to the case never gave up hope that one day he would finally get his name back. Then in 2019, the Idaho State University reached out to DNA Doe, who provided forensic genealogical services to police forces across the US. With the use of forensic genealogy and family trees, the DNA Doe Project were able to track down members of the Buffalo Cave John Doe's family, who agreed to take a DNA test for comparison. After months of testing and waiting for the results, they finally had their answers. John Doe had formerly been identified as Joseph Henry Loveless of Payson, Utah. Loveless was born on December 3, 1870, and had spent the latter years of his life running from the law. According to historical records, Loveless was accused of murdering his wife, Agnes, and was swiftly arrested. However, just days after being found guilty, he broke out of his prison cell and became a fugitive of the law. Loveless is now officially the oldest John Doe to have ever been identified. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.